Welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. Tim, Michael, and the occasional guest discussing digital analytics issues of the day. Find them on Facebook at facebook.com/analytics hour. And now, the Digital Analytics Power Hour.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. This is episode 50. If you've been listening for a long time, you probably have your own personal analytics skills locked down and you're doing great. And you're welcome. Just kidding. But now it's time to take it to the next level. We've got to sort out how analytics should be structured in your organization. Back in the day, we used to have these big conversations about where analytics should live. Marketing or IT or marketing operations, and that's cute. But we've become so much more sophisticated, haven't we? So that's what this episode is about, the structure of the analytics organization. So sit back and relax as we exhaustively solve this little problem for you. Of course, who better to join me on this odyssey into the structure of teams within the analytics space than my co-host and organizational expert, Tim Wilson.
I'm very disorganized. I'm not an organizational expert. Yeah, this will be a fun one.
This will be fun. And I am Michael Helbling. So this is a good topic for us, Tim. I think both of us have worked on both sides, consulting organizations, working within organizations. We've certainly got strong opinions about this. So the rest of this show will basically be us airing those opinions, I think is probably the best way to describe what people are about to experience.
Well, we made it to episode 50 without having an opinion about something, I guess.
There you go.
At some point.
Right you are. All right.
Actually, I feel like this may be one that I don't have a strong opinion. But
seriously?
We'll see.
All right. Well, why don't you ask me some questions, because I certainly do.
What's the right? Are we going to focus primarily on in-house, not agencies?
Yes. In-house team structure, because it's sort of, and we probably need to start creating some initial out in front boundaries or categories of types of companies, because one structure works for, a large enterprise potentially, whereas it is a silly nonsense in a smaller or medium-sized business. And a lot of that has to do with, how much is going on in this company and how important analytics is to kind of the operation of the company and where it sits in the value chain and all those kinds of things. So what have you seen work well? And let's use that as a starting point.
Well, so what works well is open communication, regardless of what the lines are. I've definitely been in the organization.
Cop out.
No. Well,
I'm sorry. Keep going.
I tend to see when there is some sort of organizational structure that has the analysts somehow relatively closely linked and not out on islands. So if you look at kind of the one extreme is every department that has a need of use of data kind of staffs, finds, hires, promotes, gets their analysts and they staff them. And then they may say, you should know who the other analysts are in the organization. To me, that tends to be less successful because you just don't have the community of best practices and sharing and cross-departmental benefits that can happen. So I tend to go towards a more centralized organization. And that's where I feel like in my both clients exposed to as well as being in-house, when there has been this is the analytics group, whatever it's called, the analytics department, the customer insights and analytics department, the analytics center of excellence, call it what you want. Having said that, I think making sure the structure and the way that gets run to have some alignment with specific business areas. And again, we're talking larger organizations here. I don't think saying, it's the pool of analysts and they just kind of sit there and it's a first in, first out queue. When you're done with report X, go and take the next request in the queue, no matter what area it's from. That doesn't work either. So I don't know. That's I tend to skew towards some level of centralization of the talent, but with some alignment to specific domain areas to the extent that the size and the mass makes sense. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I'm in I think I'm in agreement for a couple of reasons, and I'll add on a couple more. I think, the sort of centralized structure does a couple of things that I like. There are other models that I think could work. There's embedded models, right, where there's an embedded team inside of a group that dotted lines to a central organization. I've heard that called like a hub and spoke model or whatever, but I don't know if I'm even getting that right. Hub and spoke might be something different, but it's okay. We're not making pictures. I've drawn it up as a little analytics fort where you build like a little structure around all the different incoming things that you have to. It's probably not good to call it a fort because that makes it sound like you're defending against the rest of the organization, which is probably not the right thing to help build that communication thing you talk about, which I agree is very important. But the other thing that a centralized structure helps with is around cultivating talent and potentially helping keep talent longer. Because there's inconsistencies in terms of how people work within an organization. And if you have sort of your analysts out in various different places, the consistency with which they're all kind of learning and getting educated and becoming standardized on a common set of ways of kind of looking at and solving the business problems is less likely to happen. If you find the right leader for that group, you have an opportunity to create stability across that set of analysts, which then gives you a chance to keep them longer than the industry average, which could pay off in big ways in terms of their value increasing over time because they're more knowledgeable about the business as their business acumen grows. And that's certainly, if you're staffing with fairly junior analysts, I think a really important consideration is who are they going to be working with day to day? Is it going to be a bunch of people who don't really understand what they do, or is it going to be a bunch of their peers who get them and can help them weather some of the normal business storms, if you will?
Does that, to your little fort being not a good term, but that kind of spark in me that's a downside of the centralized, that you can wind up with the
right
where the group off in the corner that either people don't want to work with, or it does wind up creating separation where it's hard to get integrated with the organization, and it's easy to actually criticize the groups that you're supposed to be supporting by saying, oh, they don't get it, they're asking stupid questions.
Yeah, and that is one of the drawbacks, and that's where you have to balance that, right? I think with having a point of view of this organization exists to help support and serve and drive value to these organizations. So it has to be in the charter of that group. The way we're measured is the value we create out here.
And if they tell you that they're not getting value, then they're right, kind of definitionally.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you sit down and say, hey, how can we help drive value for you when, hey, we've provided X number of analyses. We've positioned a number of recommendations that could help this team or this brand or whatever it is that you're working within. We haven't been able to get traction or progress together. What can we do? And you start that communication piece. It's hard to get away from, I know, because communication basically solves like 90% of every problem. And then it's sort of like, but what will we have to do a podcast about? It's like, after that, like if everyone would communicate together, most of these things would just sort of fall away as issues. Luckily, a lot of people are really poor communicators. So, unlucky. Wait, no. But that going into it is why you have to think about your structure is how do you help support the organization you're in? You build the most coherent team, the team that's going to be the most effective at creating additional intelligence and cross-pollinating that intelligence across the entire company. So again, I think when we're talking about this, we're both talking about larger scale enterprise, where there's many, many different departments or brands who might be users or consumers of digital analytics. So that could be in multi-brand companies, that could be in multi-department companies where different departments own different aspects or different applications that go to the web. So, lots of different ways that could work out.
So we're kind of referring to the analytics organization as kind of this monolithic thing. When it does, we had a few episodes back, we were talking about different roles when we were looking at job descriptions, started looking at different roles. And it seems like that's another level down, even in more mid-sized organizations where you have the analyst who gets crunching data, is making reports, doing analysis. But then usually in the scope of analytics, there is the technical side of implementation. Hopefully, you're lucky if there's also kind of the advanced analytics moving in that data science-y direction. And I don't know that the organization necessarily needs to be, I don't know do you feel like all of those pieces need to be in the same group? Like, especially when it comes to the implementation aspect of tag maintenance, tag implementation, tag management, ownership, data governance, which of those aspects does that need to fall in the same group as the analysts? Or is there a case for it to be made where it's elsewhere?
Yeah, no, I think that's where we get into kind of how to kind of slice and dice this, because that's the functional pieces of the analytics org, I think, is where it starts to kind of break down a little bit in terms of how you structure and where you put all those things. And what's surprised me over the years is how few companies even have conceptual frameworks around what I call product ownership of, things like Adobe Analytics. It's like, well, who's the product owner? Well, we sort of own it over here in our analyst group. And it's like, well, that's probably not the best place because you can't really do the things that other products in your organization do. Or, well, who owns tag management? Well, I'm an administrator over here, but I have to, and it's no clarity. And that's something that just has to be worked out. Selfishly, I like, if I was running an analytics team, I'd like a more control than less. But I also think it's because I'm really selfish and want to do things my way. And so but at the same time, I have a point of view about, okay, what would it look like what would data governance look like? That's not the same set of activities as analyzing a website or a mobile app. That's a different set of activities. What does it look like to own the products that we use to do this? So that's a different set of activities. And so, I've actually sort of been chatting with a number of companies over the last couple of months, just in terms of our clients and things like that, where we've gotten a chance to kind of talk about some of those things. And it's really interesting because the companies who are making progress are doing a good job of having clarity of ownership for the products that they're leveraging for analytics, so that they know, okay, this team is responsible for taking the tool and setting it up, obviously taking inputs from this group or this other people to know what to put into the tool, right? So that could be your implementation itself, right, is owned by whatever that organization is. And I think for the technical aspects of implementation, it makes a lot of sense in a lot of places for that to live in an IT organization. Doesn't necessarily make sense for it to live there every time. There's plenty of reasons why that would be a terrible thing in some places, but sometimes it works that way. And then you've got, the analysis piece, the who's using it, how do you administer it, all those kinds of things. So, okay, well, how does somebody from outside of not an analyst come ask us for help? What does that look like? Who's taking those requests? How do we prioritize those? Who's going to, how do we make sure we're kind of translating that into a valuable business question as much as possible?
I agree. I think that's the handoff from what data the analyst needs. Like somewhere between this is the data that we would care about and a level of how it could be organized or structured, right? The classic of, I've definitely seen cases where pure IT, pure developers have said, we'll just do the tagging. We'll just put an insane level of detail because you can always roll it up later, which in theory sounds great, but that could make the data insanely messy, or you could run into cardinality issues. So somewhere between
I don't know if I've ever experienced an IT organization saying, yeah, let's just collect all the data.
No, not so much collect all the data, but saying, we're going to go ahead and tack on this identifier on the end of this string so that now to get the number of how many times somebody clicked on a button, you actually have one row for every time somebody clicked because you also appended on there, some other session identifier. And they're like, hey, you have all that. So that I've absolutely run into where we're like, yeah, we thought, you wanted to just capture the first 3 characters of this because that's what really mattered. You could roll it up. We captured the whole thing. And so you wind up with a big, long list. So, but from the, hey, let's sort of think through how we might want to use this data, which is kind of the analyst realm, to we need to come up with an efficient, maintainable, scalable, extensible implementation of how we're doing that, which falls kind of on the IT end. And I think it doesn't really matter whether ownership of that translation lives in the analyst world or if it lives in IT, as long as it's owned by somebody who is able to communicate and think through the other perspective. I've got a couple of clients. Well, I've got one client that role kind of sits in the analyst world, and he is phenomenal when it comes to, he's sitting there with the analyst, but he is getting stuff articulated and documented exactly what IT needs to do for them in their language. I've got another client that's the flip side. It's somebody in IT, and he's totally thinking through, like, how would this data be useful? How are you going to use it? Let me understand that so that what I come up with actually makes sense. But I also see places where that gap is missing. I had a client years ago where in IT, it literally was just a ticket system saying whatever developer is available, like they're going to get assigned a task by the project manager. And if it's implement the tags, they implement the tags. And the analyst organization was pretty damn weak on coming up with a good tagging schema and approach. And oh, by the way, it turned out when that's how the developers were set up, that's about the most boring crap they could do is get shitty requirements, and they're just implementing JavaScript stuff. And this was a pre-tag management, which means they avoid it like the plague and they roll off, and it's not particularly fulfilling work. And it was a mess. Like nothing ever went well the first time.
Yeah, well, and those kinds of structures are just set up to not work well, right? Because there's no interest or investment in the success of it. I do agree with you, and I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's like maybe a system and, systems analysis type of role is kind of really missing sometimes. And that is sort of why are we doing what we do? How does this map into our overall success or what we're trying to accomplish?
So as you've been talking to different organizations and thinking through, so those different roles, so probably the thing that to me seems like it matters the least is who actually owns the tool, the licensing, re-upping contract.
Well, only to the extent that whoever owns the tool also owns what's going to be in the tool at the end of the day.
Well, I guess I'm saying that aspect of it is the mechanical administrative, but that next level of there's the what, where, and how it's being used.
But even there, I get what you're trying to do, but I also don't want to give too short a shrift to the product ownership side of it or product management side, because done well, that means the data is available, the data quality has been thought about, all those kinds of things are being addressed.
No. I wasn't disagreeing with anything you said. I was just saying there's a level of that which is sign the fucking contract. Beat up on Adobe when they come and tell you you've got a fucking overage that they surprised you with because they're squeezing more money out of you. Like that. Yeah. That is a pain in the ass and that I don't think matters. Actual product ownership, I think you can have product management. No, so let's not call it ownership.
Okay,
product
management, like it.
And I guess that was the real question is where are you seeing that make more sense?
Well, I think I am, I always deviate back to my own selfish way of wanting to do that, which would mean I'd want it in my org. But different role, product management would be a different role or part of someone's role as distinct from an analysis role or a technical role. But I could see it living, so in my head, if I'm making a picture.
For our listening audience out there, Michael's eyes are closed right now. There's a picture in his head. He's not drawing one for me. We're in the same boat, dear listener.
I'm running smack dab into the limitations of the medium. Not good with words.
Face for podcasts.
No, so, because I would see myself sitting in a marketing or research group. Like that's where the analytics org would live. And in that org, I could have product ownership sit there, but product management, we're now calling it product management, I would be okay with the right partnership of the product management sitting in IT or something like that, or an ops type thing.
But really we're talking about where does a role sit that rarely exists in organizations, right? I mean,
I feel like it's getting less rare. I think it was really rare 10 years ago, and I think honestly, I think tag management woke up a lot of companies. They're like, you're doing what on our website? And that made people, be like, oh yeah, all these marketing tags that marketing's been, and that's actually what caused the problem in the first place was marketing said, hey, I've got this new technology I want to launch. IT, help me launch it, right? Prior to tag management, that's kind of what was going on. And marketing doesn't think like about product management, really.
Yeah.
Not a lot of marketers anyways. And if you're a marketer and you think only about product management, feel free, of course, to comment about that.
I mean, I see a lot of marketers who say they saw a sales pitch and they say we should get that product, and there is absolutely no ability to think through how
nobody's thinking about
what the actual path and the plan is and how it needs to be managed.
And the process piece, that's the piece that is really needing to be managed. Is sort of okay. Well, then who's going to do what when? How do we take a new idea and put it into this? And it doesn't have to be like for every tool, there's one person whose job it is to manage that product. I mean, a product manager could manage 25 different, marketing and measurement technologies, right? You don't need a different guy for ClickTail and GA. You just need one person to kind of make sure they're thinking through what's going to happen with all of those. And certainly tag management gives you a way to structure product management centrally. So you manage the TMS, which then makes you the manager of all the other technologies within it, which is good.
Yeah, but that's actually making me think through some other situations I've seen where it's been, I guess, would be considered executive sponsor, or maybe let's just call it the person with budget authority sees a shiny bauble and purchases it, and with zero interest or awareness about process or laying out a roadmap or timing or what pieces need to fit the management aspect of it. They throw a project manager on it and say, get this implemented. They kind of just say, well, my goal here is to get this thing implemented. I'm not owning it. They're a project manager. And then all of a sudden they've got this technology out on the site and tag management helped them get that implemented quickly. And then they're sitting 6 months in and the vendor's starting to shit bricks because they're like, we're coming up to re-up our contract in 6 months and you haven't done anything with it because there is no ownership. Yeah, I might be thinking through a very specific example right now.
Well, and it's
a little better.
It's probably the world's best segue into the structure of optimization teams, but I don't want to get to that yet. But no, you're absolutely right. And in those kinds of scenarios, usually have all the people involved kind of looking at each other across the table and being like, yeah, everybody, this is, it's shiny bauble syndrome. And it's, on us to try to figure out the pieces, to make, keep this person happy who has the money that we also all live on. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's I like that. The idea of stepping back and thinking through, and I want to do that kind of mental checklist of product management.
The best organizations have the executive who's like, okay, let's talk about product management and how this is going to make us better as a company. And I've actually been in a few conversations like that where it was kind of like, first it was like, let's gung ho personalized segment and, Cartesian, Bayesian, whatever. And the executive is like, whoa.
You say Cartesian and Bayesian just to see if Matt Gershoff's head explodes.
I have no idea.
Just they kind of rhyme.
I have no idea. I literally have no idea. Those are just words I have heard. I don't know.
Sorry, I had to interrupt you. I'm not going to let you just go through that.
That's fine because I set them to kind of indicate sort of just a run
high pie in the sky,
run, crawl, walk methodology.
Yeah, right.
But in that scenario, the executive is like, whoa. So let's slow our roll and let's develop something that will really be sustainable and last and really serve the organization, even if it takes longer to kind of get to that point. What does that look like? And you know how enthusiastic I can be about something like that? I'm very enthusiastic because it could take a long time to get there, but now you're on a path to actually creating value with this stuff as opposed to just sort of like a couple flashes in the pan and then everybody quits and they start over again. So that's those kinds of situations are really exciting. So that's, let's go back to last episode as you're assessing jobs out there, people look for that kind of thinking at the senior levels.
For those out there who are realizing that Michael was actually present for the last couple of episodes, he's just talking about
a few episodes ago. They all sort of merge together.
It's all just one ongoing conversation.
I was on
At some point, they'll figure out that we recorded all the episodies back to back in one marathon.
Right. This was recorded on January 3rd, 2016. Very topically relevant. Anyway, okay, so where we were headed, and I think, so we both are putting a check in the box of product management, and I feel like that's the truth. What about...
Well, let me ask one quick question. So do you see organizations, this is back to the organization type, organizations that are more pure play web, like pure play e-commerce site is going to have product managers who are, the product is aspects of the web.
Right.
Are those types of organizations more geared towards saying any technology we have needs a product manager, as opposed to take your 100-year-old financial services company that isn't even really, doesn't have product managers internally for anything that they're selling? Do you see that?
Yeah, I do, because, well, I mean, that's sort of where I learned about product management and became a big believer in it. Was my good friend Cam Jensen was a product manager at Land's End, and he was like, wait, who's going to manage this, and this? And we talked, so it was through those kinds of conversations and experiences. So I do think you have a better chance, right, for that to be brought up more holistically in an environment where product management is thought about in those terms. But I think a lot of different organizations have that. You just have to tap into the right groups or the right people to be able to bring that forward.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So now let's talk about the analyst organization a little bit, because there's new kinds of departments and teams that are forming out there inside of the marketing realm, like, market research organization, the consumer research, customer insights, customer experience. So where should that live inside of that if we take the analyst organization as distinct from maybe some of the technical parts of the organization that we've been talking about so far? In your mind, Tim, is there a best place for that analyst group?
So I think I'm understanding the question. I've never fully understood, as common as it seems to have optimization in one group that may be very separated from the web analytics group, which is certainly very separated from the market research or consumer research group. Because relatively early in my career, I worked somewhere where those were all lumped into one organization, and it seems so obvious and natural. I struggle with teams that have that split up, and I've asked people to kind of articulate it, and whatever the articulation is hasn't ever really stuck. Maybe I just haven't been receptive to it.
You have not respected those people. You just disrespect their opinions.
No. Well, I mean, I think so. I feel like sometimes it's like, well, it just kind of, it actually goes back to being a product thing. Like the web analytics stuff was around longer. The consumer research or the market research or the competitive intelligence just grew up in a different area. It was the brand team as opposed to the group that was standing up the website. Like there were groups that have grown up in different places. And I literally have not ever really figured out exactly why they don't come together. I've watched cases where people removed from all of those have gotten confused and thought that somebody who was in the analytics organization was actually in the customer research organization. And I'm like, those two organizations are nowhere near each other, and it's been a battle to get them to work with each other, but good on you. Somebody who's just out there thinking, well, shit, these are the people who have data and insights. I assume they're all part of the same organization, and they're not. And it just makes no sense to me whatsoever, because every one of them is going to get a question that they get asked. They're going to see their little domain of tools, and they're going to try to answer that question. And it comes in where somebody asks a question about, what do our consumers looking for when they come to our site, or what do consumers most want from our website? And you're like, damn it, I'm going to find that in web analytics. Like, well, shit, maybe you should go put that in your next consumer survey,
right,
and ask them. So everybody has their little hammer and they see everything as a nail. Whereas if the one time I worked, it was this was like 20 people total that covered the data warehouse, the market research, web analytics, BI. So maybe that was a $500 million company. It was like, yeah, that was our little community. People came and asked us a question, and we were 10 feet away from the person who might have the best answer if it wasn't us. And we were kind of forced to be aware of this is the broad set, primary research, secondary research, a test, A/B test, surveys, email surveys, web analytics. That to me seemed like it was so functional, and it is, I've yet to see it's rare to find other organizations that are set up that way.
Yeah, and there are a bunch of different disciplines that you kind of touched on, and they all kind of have their own spot. And I struggle actually with this a little bit, and I honestly don't know that I've got a really clear, in one sense, if you're in an organization where each of these roles is represented by like one person, then by all means, at least put everybody together in the same place so that that kind of conversation and communication can happen. So in other words, if you've got one market research person and you've got one UX person and you've got one analyst, let's make sure they're close to each other. Let them all talk about the problems of the business together and combine their knowledge. That will benefit the organization greatly. When it grows into disparate teams, that are kind of running their own programs and things like that, then I kind of can see them kind of going their own way, but still there being some centralizing kind of structure, whether that be that they all come up into one big sort of, central structure. And I don't know, because, in certain places you have sort of concepts of revenue management kind of driving analytics. Some you have experience driving analytics. So it kind of depends on the organization and kind of where analytics kind of dings for that organization in terms of what they really see it doing. And yeah, I guess I wish I had a better answer on that, but I could see it happening, but I do know there's a ton of value in getting more communication happening across those disparate teams.
Yeah, well, and I think there's also, earlier we were talking about when somebody newer or junior comes in, I think it's incredibly useful for them to actually have some exposure to what those other groups are. I feel like people who are our age, who maybe wound up in one area or another, it just doesn't, like primary research, it just does not cross, secondary research. Primary research definitely crosses my mind, like, hey, we should be asking people this. Secondary research, and when I was at one of the agencies I was at, we had contracts. We were paying good money with these secondary research organizations, and the people who, the product owner, product managers of that secondary research, they're like, we have this valuable stuff. Nobody's coming and asking us the questions we can use to answer it. And we actually pulled them in and we said, hey, you know what? Our kind of monthly sort of get-togethers where we're sort of sharing what we're doing. We want you guys to come and share with us, and we'll share with you guys, because we should all be thinking this is like this full set of tools that we have. So I guess, yeah, if organizationally they're not one organization, if they're not even rolling up within one centralized organization, that's, I guess, it's another case for communication, saying, well, those are people you need to know who they are and what they're doing, and you should be taking them to lunch and saying, what's the cool data you have and what's that good for? Because they probably already have it and it's free and it's easy stuff for you to piggyback on, and hey, you can add more value to your organization when you use the right data to answer the question.
Right. And actually that's the kind of conversation that gets you in pretty good with those teams. It's like, what challenges have you been trying to get other people to pay attention to that they aren't? And what can we do to help with our data set?
Yeah. And how can we route people to you? If they're asking us a question and I copy you in on it, let's get together. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the right way to loop you into these conversations so that you can get a spot at the table? Because invariably everybody's dealing with their own aspects of having buy-in or not having buy-in from various parts of the organization and trying to solve that problem. So on the, whatever our counterpart is in the market research world, if there is one, the market research power hour, that makes me want to go look and see if there's actually like any market research. I'm sure there are market research podcasts. So. Yeah, I'm sure. Good on us for really doing our homework there on me. Guys.
I don't think we knew it was going to go here.
No, exactly. But But to that point is like, I imagine they have similar challenges because not a lot of people really understand what they do or, how they do it and those kinds of things. So bridging that gap and understanding the mutual challenges is something that can be really effective. Okay, so we've touched on it a little bit, but we haven't gotten into it, which is the next thing, which is optimization. And that sort of optimization is sort of that middle ground between analysis and execution on insights, right? Where it's learning, validation, all those kinds of things. So what have you seen work there? And is it the same as analytics, different?
I honestly haven't seen a whole lot there. I don't work with a lot of organizations that have really built out optimization heavily. It winds up the organizations I'm working with, it's kind of starting in the analytics organization, which I think is fine, except it's usually under invested in. We need to get Dylan back on to explain to us on the optimization front.
Seriously. Yeah. Why didn't we ask him more questions? No, well, it's a good point. It is hard to find organizations that are doing a good job of this. I do think it's distinctly different enough from what an analyst does that it may or may not need to sit in a different group or its own group. However, I agree with you. I don't like taking optimization or testing. I don't like taking those things away from the analyst. I think that's the best and funnest part of an analyst's job is that kind of work. And it really sucks when you're like, yeah, you got us to the 20-yard line and now we're going to hand it to the real stars who are going to run it into the end zone. So because that's the value creation piece of analytics, that's the part where I want to keep analysts involved. However, executing analysis versus executing optimization is a much different set of tasks and parameters. And so you have to incorporate or you have to account for that. And so you actually are affecting the user experience. There is development changes to the site. There is a much higher level of QA. It's not, I'm missing this data. It's I'm fucking up the customer experience. Right. And so there's lots and lots of different stakeholders and groups. And that's where I've seen stuff like steering committees or councils kind of become really good vehicles for driving optimization forward because they help with execution, they help with follow through, and they help with prioritization, which are three critical things, I think, for any optimization program.
And follow through meaning accountability, saying, hey, if you found something.
Yeah, no, we ran an A/B test and A and B was the winner by, a mile and a half. But, now IT is saying, well, we can't make that live on the website for another 18 months. That committee sitting there and being like the loss of opportunity for not prioritizing this in terms of execution is this much. Should we then use our combined strength to go and push this through the organization more effectively? That's what I mean by that.
Yeah. And I'll back up a little bit and say that although not clients or organizations I've worked in, but I can think of one retailer here in Columbus where the optimization is totally rolls up. It is one manager that is doing analytics and optimization. But then I'm thinking of other much larger organizations where there are so many tests and they're pretty proud of how the volume of the throughput of tests that really the testing organization is this massive group that is largely just being fed it's kind of product management. Product management of the site product is what's driving the tests, which makes sense. So being aligned with product managers, if you've got strong product management of site functionality, there's some level of saying, yeah, they're the ones who are accountable for making the product of the checkout process or the product of the catalog work effectively. So it makes sense to be well aligned with them. But yeah, that whole idea of analytics informing which test to run, it gets messy.
Well, I think it's not just analytics that drives that what test to run conversation. It's that committee because it's all those people who are like, hey, I need optimization over here. Can you guys, because the analytics organization is not an island unto itself, right? It owns driving business value forward. So it's going to want to look at and solve the biggest and most valuable problems if it's doing its job.
Yeah. So the large organizations.
I think we got that one solved.
We're done.
If you don't work in a large organization, just go work in a large organization. So this will all make sense. No, I'm just kidding. No, but and in reality, it's because you can do it so many different ways, and the nimbleness of a smaller organization just then puts everything on the people themselves. And so if you get a great person or a great group of people, there's nothing you can't accomplish in a smaller or faster growing organization, which is a wonderful thing on its own. And, there's things that can scare the crap out of you, like, oh yeah, I can change the website right here from my desktop, versus, it being kind of too locked down and, oh, it's got to go through these 4 committees and it taking forever for something to happen. Well, our committee on when to end the podcast is telling us that between now and the next 2.5 minutes is the optimal time to start wrapping up. So we're going to do that. But if you've been listening, we definitely want to hear from you too. But before we do that, let's go around and do a last call. This is something on the show we like to do. Talk about something we found that's interesting lately. What do you got for last call, Tim?
I am going to defer to you because I think yours is going to be like serious and useful, and mine's going to be whimsical, and I might have to check one little fact.
Mine is actually a joke that I heard. No, it's not. A little while back, I saw a tweet from Jeff Chasen, somebody who's
former guest on this podcast.
And actually in line with what he was a guest on the podcast for, which is technical skills for analysts. He tweeted out this link to 10 tips for maximizing the Chrome Developer Console, and they are outstanding. These are excellent tips. And where would you want to, where do you interact with the Chrome Developer Console? Typically, when you're doing quality assurance types of things, testing tags, trying to see what's firing. Certainly, if anyone ever uses Adobe DTM, right, you get debug mode turned on and you can see what DTM is doing, what tags are firing. And the console is a very powerful tool, and knowing how to use it is a really great thing. So not everything in there is necessarily applicable, but it was a really good set of tips that I thought, people could, benefit from.
That's awesome. So since you went with such a fantastic and useful and practical, I'm going to go completely off the deep end on random. And it really was the inspired by our discussion before we started recording. I am going to recommend from 2005, The Comedians of Comedy, available on Netflix. Patton Oswalt, Zach Galifianakis, Brian Posehn.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce it? Right. And Maria Bamford. Fantastic comments. And they basically just do a tour and they record it, and it's kind of awesome. So that's a little bit, that was inspired because Helbling, you were talking about Maria Bamford's newer series. So, go have a laugh. When your organizational frustrations have really gotten to you, go watch the Comedians of Comedy tour.
Wasn't that Ricky Gervais's catchphrase from the show Extras? You having a laugh?
Wow.
Yeah.
Might have been. I saw like 3 episodes of Extras. I actually know who Ricky Gervais is, and I know the premise of Extras, and have actually seen a couple of episodes.
That's about as close as you've come to getting a pop culture reference ever. So I'll take it.
And that's
a win.
That was it. That was it.
That's a win.
Squeaked it in right before the end of the year. I got it knocked out for. There's my personal KPI for
the stuff
for 2016.
All right. If you've been listening and you've got something to say, we'd love to hear from you. We're on the Measure Slack all the time, our Facebook page. You can even reach out to us on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you if you agree or disagree. And Also, it's getting close to the end of the year. If you've been a listener for a while and you enjoy even an episode or two, we'd love for you to rate us on iTunes. Let iTunes know what you think of the show. That is very appreciated.
It's like your holiday gift from you to us.
That's right.
In the holiday season.
In lieu of whiskey, we would take an iTunes rating. No.
Oh, wait a minute. Easy there. I'll take the whiskey.
You'll take the whiskey. All right. But yeah, as always, Tim, a great conversation. Always thought-provoking. Appreciate it. And if you're out there listening, keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, or Measure Slack group. We welcome your comments and questions. facebook.com/analytics hour or at analytics hour on Twitter.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
You ready? You ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready? Are you? Me? You?
Talking to me?
Talking to me? All right.
Talking to me?
Me, mo.
We could just stop there and go talk about SIC codes instead.
Well, I mean, that was
That's what we did.
sort of me playing for time, which you then shut down. So, no,
I'm now going to be in therapy, the fact that I just yanked that out of my ass.
remember when we used to have those big conversations about whether analytics should live in marketing or IT? I don't know what I'm doing. Because, listen, I'm not very handy. I'm just going to get that out there.
Operating an aerosol can. A little much.
No, it's just... so, what's your favorite, Tim?
My favorite SIC code?
Yeah.
I think it's 6780.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't even know if that's a valid SIC code, but...
Well, it falls into finance, insurance, and real estate, so
Oh, good lord.
that range.
We are officially completely off the
No,
rails.
we are. This is right where we want to be. I actually had somebody today go, "What? You have a podcast?" And I work with them. And I was like, I need to do a better job talking about the podcast.
Still don't have the PO box set up. But
Yeah, that's
we'll work it
right. Culver City, California. Just.
out. Wow.
Oh.
Got that one. Rock flag and org charts.